Good afternoon and welcome to Live Impact News right here on 13 News Now Plus. It is January 5th, 2026. Today is Monday. It is 1:02 p.m. and we are here as always for 2 hours of Live Impact News. All the breaking news you need to know, all the most pressing news you need to know, and it all comes on a very busy Monday so far after a very busy weekend when it comes to international relations for the United States of America. We are going to dig into an update on Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro in just a moment, and then we will get to weather. But before we do any of those things, we have to say hello to the People's producer, Nia Campbell. Nia, welcome to another week of Live Impact News.
Hello. How are you doing?
I am doing great because on my way into the studio today, I saw a flat screen in our station at 13 News Now declaring Nia Campbell the Employee of the Month for the month of November. We're a little behind on announcing these things, but did my eyes see what they thought they saw?
Yes, they did.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Employee of the Month around here? Pretty big stuff. But as you know, if you watch Live Impact News, Nia Campbell deserves it because she always keeps us on track throughout our days here of streaming all of the news that you need to know. Now, it's nice to start things off on a lighthearted note. It's always good to ease into the week, but from a big picture perspective, we do not have that luxury this week because, as we said, a very busy weekend for the United States of America. Venezuelan president, or ousted Venezuelan president as of this moment, Nicolas Maduro, was apprehended by the United States on Saturday from his home country of Venezuela. Today, he appeared in a Manhattan courtroom not long ago on this Monday afternoon on a number of different charges, drugs and weapons charges to be specific. When asked by the judge how he pleads to this indictment, Maduro responded, "I am innocent, I am not guilty, I am a decent man, and I am still president of my country." That, according to ABC News, was Maduro's response to the question of how he pleads in a Manhattan courtroom earlier today, the ousted president of Venezuela, in being held in the United States on weapons and drugs charges. That is our current update right now. That plea is our latest update on the Nicolas Maduro situation, the Venezuelan president who is now being held in the United States on those charges. His wife was with him in the courtroom as well. She said, Celia Flores is her name, the First Lady of the Republic of Venezuela is how she presented herself. And she also, in a Manhattan courtroom, standing beside her husband and was asked how she pleads guilty to the indictments that she faces. She responded as well, not guilty, completely innocent. So Maduro and Flores are among 6 defendants named in a 4-count superseding indictment that accused them of conspiring with violent, dangerous drug traffickers for the last 25 years. Again, allegations that Maduro denies. So that is our current update. We expect more updates to come in throughout the day. The United Nations has been meeting throughout the afternoon discussing the situation between the United States and Venezuela. We will, if that goes live again, if the United Nations goes back live, we will head out there live during our show here today. If not, we recorded a number of comments from earlier today. We'll play back some of the various member nations of the UN speaking on the current situation between Venezuela and the United States. So that is our update. We expect to hear from Pete Hegseth today as well. The Secretary of Defense is in Newport News. We have reporters on scene at that event. We do not know if he will speak on the situation in Venezuela, but either way, we will go live to Pete Hegseth, who is, again, here in Newport News in Hampton Roads. So as you know, a lot on the docket. But before we go any further with those major headlines of the day, we want to have a check on our forecast, which is why Taylor Stephenson joins us here in studio. Taylor, that was a lengthy intro. I'm sorry to kind of keep you waiting here. I know you're busy. I know you've already worked a very long day. One, how are you on this Monday afternoon?
I'm fine, obviously Monday, so I think that most of us are like, especially for people who, not myself, but people who had to go back to work today, they're probably like, can we go back on another holiday vacation again?
I know. This feels like the first official full week back from the holidays, an uninterrupted work week. And today, I was driving out of my parking lot, and one, it was quite chilly, which we're going to talk about, quite a bit of frost on the car. But two, there were kids waiting at the bus stop for the first time in a few weeks.
Yeah.
And another kid was walking up with his mom. And the moms got really excited to see each other.
Aww.
They clearly hadn't seen each other in a while. The kids did not share in that excitement, from what I could tell, to be returning back to school during my sort of brief drive-by of that interaction. But let's get back to the forecast. What are we looking at? Was I right to the frost on my car? Was that normal through Hampton Roads?
I mean, I didn't see any frost on my side. Not to say that negates your experience, but
thank you. I appreciate that.
But definitely cold enough for frost. Temperatures were in the 20s this morning. Now that also depends if your car is parked outside. Mine was in the covered garage, so obviously, even though there are some entryways, like our windows are open in the garage, still probably too warm inside of our garage to have frost. But for people who parked outdoors, you may have seen a little bit of frost. Yes, temperatures are cold this morning, but good news is we're going to be way more mild as we get into the afternoon. We get even more warmth tomorrow and the day after, and then after that, showers are heading our direction this weekend. So here's what I'm looking at right now from our Thompson Creek Window Company sky view overlooking downtown Norfolk. We're seeing increasing cloud cover this afternoon. Don't let that scare you. There's not going to be any rain. It's just clouds moving into the region. We have an upper level system, and that's just a big fancy kind of terminology for an upper level cold front, or a cold front way up in the atmosphere. That's just bringing us some cloud cover. It won't bring us any type of rainfall, but you can see that it's a little bit more gloomy than where we started off this morning with bright sunny skies. Temperatures right now sitting in the upper 40s and lower 50s for most areas. If you're around the eastern shore, you're still stuck in the lower 40s, but definitely an improvement from yesterday where highs in Norfolk only reached 41 degrees. So we are seeing definitely much warmer temperatures compared to the weekend, where on Saturday we didn't even break into the 40s. We were in the 30s all day long. Sunday we broke barely into the 40s, and now we're right near normal in those lower 50s. And it all has to do with that blue HUC that's hovering offshore of the Outer Banks. That's a high pressure system. When it starts to slide offshore, it brings in south winds. South winds transport really warm air from the south to the north. And so over the course of the next few days, you'll notice this big warm up as south winds continue. Here's a live look from our satellite and radar, and you can see that the cloudier conditions through Richmond, Emporia, Roanoke Rapids starting to spread to the east. So places around the peninsula's western south side and western portions of northeastern North Carolina, you're going to see some of the thicker cloud cover moving in the course of the next couple of hours. Right now, though, temperatures in the lower 50s. We may climb an extra degree or two. Really won't do much in terms of the way it feels outside, but it's just really more for, of course, seeing where the records kind of stand. But we may hit 52 degrees, maybe some places 53, but it's going to be in the lower 50s, feeling like the lower 50s. What you'll notice tonight, though, is that we'll have cloud cover sticking around, but temperatures won't be nearly as cold as they were last night. By 9 p.m. after sunset, temperatures drop into the upper 30s to the middle 40s, which during this time of year, typically we'll see temperatures dropping to the 30s around this time. So a more mild evening and night for us. Speaking of after sunset, sunsets are getting later now in January. I think a lot of people are anticipating the later sunsets and more daylight.
Yeah, we like to call that heading in the right direction,
right?
With the sunset.
Because Connor wants to skip all the way to summer, like 6 months from now, where it's like 8 p.m. sunsets, 90 degrees.
Oh,
you see, I'm getting him excited.
come on.
But that is not what's going to be on the docket for us here on the weather team. But I am watching for sunsets tonight around 5:03, where before on New Year's Day we had sunset before 5 p.m. So improvements. By the end of the month, we'll have sunsets around 5:30. By the end of February, by around 6 o'clock. So you'll notice each and every day it does seem to get a little bit, or the sunlight seems to stick around for a little bit longer. I actually noticed that. I think it was yesterday. I was like, oh, it's 4:30 and it's not almost pitch black outside. Sunshine is still sticking around for us here. So, excuse me, high pressure is sliding offshore for us. So I consider 60s fall-like. I would think that's like late October-ish weather, early November. So fall-like temperatures on the horizon for not only us, but the majority of the mid-Atlantic through the deep south, where even places like Atlanta, And Charleston, South Carolina, mid-60s. Houston, Texas, 82 degrees tomorrow. I mean, that is really getting into summertime warmth. So you can see that across most of the lower 48, not really seeing crazy temperatures. One of my best friends actually lives in Chicago, and I think she's going to enjoy 42 tomorrow because a lot of times during this time of the year, they're in like the 20s.
Those high 20s, low 30s.
Yeah.
So for them, what we're feeling with 60, that's how she feels about 42.
Exactly.
Okay.
So it's all thanks to that high pressure system. So here's what we'll get tomorrow as you start the day off. Not nearly as cold. We started this morning off in the 20s and low 30s. Tomorrow, lower 40s and upper 30s. By the time we get into the afternoon, much more cloud cover than today. As you can see, cloudy skies and temperatures hovering right around 60 degrees. Now, I'm looking ahead to our next system. That is going to be a cold front that rolls through. This is around Friday during the day. Now, our showers won't really come till around Friday night to Saturday morning, and the showers will be more scattered in nature and continue through parts of the day on Saturday, lingering through Sunday morning, and finally clearing out. But any rainfall that we do get around this front will be beneficial. You can see that we are underneath abnormally dry conditions through all of Hampton Roads, the peninsulas, and northeastern North Carolina. But the majority of the Commonwealth and almost all of North Carolina are underneath some type of drought. The tan color is a moderate drought, and in Northern Virginia, that's a severe drought. So rainfall, it will be super helpful for us. I know that it can be annoying that it comes during the weekend, but good news is right now, not anticipating any thunderstorms. So any type of like garden variety showers, I'm cool with because not going to really cause that much of a mess or a nuisance. So here's a look at your 5 to 7 day forecast, and you'll see temperatures are still in the lower 50s today, but today is the coolest day of the next 5. You can believe that. As we get into the rest of your 7-day forecast, lower 60s today, tomorrow, and getting near 60 on Thursday, back to the mid 60s Friday and Saturday ahead of that cold front that will bring in some stronger south winds. We'll see scattered showers throughout the weekend, but notice that cold front bring a pretty good mix of cooler air by Sunday. Not the biggest blast, of course, we've seen, but a noticeable difference between Saturday and Sunday. Highs by Saturday will fall about 10 to 15 degrees, back near normal to the lower to middle 50s with clearing skies. So overall, in the weather department, Craig and I were talking this morning, it's a pretty chill week for us until we get to the weekend. So we're very grateful for having some just very lackluster is not kind of the word, but just basic days.
Yes, basic days. You need those sometimes, kind of reset, recalibrate. And I mean, just seeing those temperatures in the 60s was some of what we've been dealing with over the past, really December had some abnormally cold stretches. And so it's nice to see up in the 60s here for a couple of days. We get a little taste of the spring almost.
Yeah,
even
for sure.
a little bit. So, okay, awesome. So a nice chill week, hopefully anticipated for the weather department.
Yes.
You guys deserve it.
Thanks.
And some warmth for everybody else. No more frost on my car for the rest of the week, we're thinking.
No, not at all.
And it would be nice if I had a sweet garage like Taylor Stevenson and Nia Campbell to keep the car in. You guys are blessed with that, with the overhead there, the protection. Okay, anything else that we need to know?
No, I mean, very chill week here weather-wise, so nothing else to really talk about.
Is there anything about when we've had such a like consistently cold climate for such a long time here as we work our way into the winter, does a little splash of warmth like this, does that create any weather phenomenon that are sort of abnormal?
No, not particularly.
Yeah.
It's just in the kind of normal ups and downs. I know that probably farmers are really keeping a big eye on that with the ups and downs drastically in our temperatures, but not any really weather phenomenon. It's just making sure if you are a gardener that your plants are protected when we do have those colder outbreaks for a little bit, but we get to these times and you're okay.
Okay, awesome. Nia Campbell, any questions for Taylor?
No questions for me?
Okay.
No questions. Enjoy the sunshine, enjoy the warmth.
I will.
And thanks for hanging with us for a little bit, as always.
All right, see you all later.
Taylor Stephenson in the house for a forecast to start our week, and what a wonderful forecast it was. We are looking at some very comfortable temperatures coming up here, and then this weekend a little bit of rain. I think Taylor called it garden variety, but still very, very warm out there, which is what we like to see. Now, I think maybe what we should do here as we conclude our forecast is jump back into that big headline of the day, right? Which is the United States conducting an operation in into Venezuela on Saturday, apprehending the president of Venezuela, Nicolas Maduro, and his wife, taking them back to the United States. And now they are appearing in court on a number of different charges, a number of different criminal charges. That is the big story of the day. President Donald Trump on Saturday said the U.S. would take control of Venezuela's massive oil reserves and recruit American companies to invest money to refurbish the country's gutted oil industry. Venezuela, one of 303 billion barrels worth of crude oil that can be one of the most valuable assets in the world if thought of as one sort of unified thing. And so that, again, the acting president, Delcy Rodriguez in Venezuela, has preached cooperation with the United States recently. And so that is where things stand. So that is, President Trump has, we have a quote here from a news conference at Mar-a-Lago. We're going to have our very large United States oil companies, the biggest anywhere in the world, go in, spend billions of dollars, fix the badly broken infrastructure, the oil infrastructure. That is what President Donald Trump said about, again, Venezuela's massive crude oil reserves. And Trump said the United States would operate the Venezuelan government for the time being. Of course, we read you Nicolas Maduro's quote from a Manhattan courthouse earlier today where he said he is still the president of his country. But we've heard from Nicolas Maduro via quote. That's a quote from President Donald Trump. Let's listen in on President Trump's actual press conference aboard Air Force One from this weekend. Nia, it looks like you have a clip all pulled up for us here. Okay, let's go and listen in.
Detail what watching that was like when all this played out in Venezuela and what Maduro was doing that moment.
Well, I knew the possible danger. It was a very dangerous operation. It was amazing that we had a few injured, but all are in good shape right now. But I knew there was great danger. We got off the helicopter. The helicopters were being shot at. They got on the ground. Amazing talent and tremendous patriotism, bravery. The bravery was incredible. Let's say they got off the helicopter and the bullets were flying all over the place. As you know, one of the helicopters got hit pretty badly, but then we got everything back. And nobody killed.
The next question is who's in charge of Venezuela right now. Have you spoken to the newly sworn in president there, Rodriguez? And what are your thoughts on the entire situation? You said the U.S. will run Venezuela.
We're dealing with the people. We're dealing with the people that just got sworn in. And don't ask me who's in charge because I'll give you an answer and it'll be very controversial.
What does that mean?
We're in charge.
Have you spoken with her?
We're in charge.
Have you spoken with her?
No, I haven't, but other people.
Do you want to?
At the right time. We have to do one thing in Venezuela, bring it back. It's a dead country right now. It's a country that, frankly, we would have been, if I had lost the election, we would have been a dead country. We would have been Venezuela on steroids. Venezuela right now is a dead country. We have to bring it back. And we're going to have big investments by the oil companies to bring back the infrastructure. And the oil companies are ready to go. They're going to go in. They're going to rebuild the infrastructure. You know, the country is a mess. It's been horribly run. The oil is just flowing at a very low level, much lower than, even if it was badly run, it should have more income, more oil than what they're doing. So we're going to have the big oil companies go in. They're going to fix the infrastructure. They're going to invest money. We're not going to invest anything. We're going to just take care of the country. We're going to cherish the country. We're going to take care, more importantly, of the people, including Venezuelans that are living in our country that were forced to leave their country. And they're going to be taken very good care of. Yes, ma'am.
So what is going to happen to those reserves?
We're going to run everything. We're going to run it, fix it. We'll have elections at the right time. The main thing you have to face is a broken country.
What are your short-term next 2 weeks? What do you need from Delcy Rodriguez?
Just total access. We need total access. We need access to the oil and to other things in their country that allow us to rebuild their country.
What are the things?
A lot of things. Roads that aren't built, bridges that are falling down. Yeah, bridges that are falling down, nobody can go anywhere.
On Greenland,
What, Greenland now?
Yeah, on Greenland.
How did we come up to Greenland?
So, do you expect to take an action against Greenland
I don't want to talk about Greenland. Let's talk about Venezuela, Russia, Ukraine, and we'll worry about Greenland in about 2 months. Let's talk about Greenland in 20 days.
Venezuela, we talked so much about energy.
By the way, I will say this about Greenland. We need Greenland from a national security situation. It's so strategic. Right now, Greenland is covered with Russian and Chinese ships all over the place. We need Greenland from the standpoint of national security. And Denmark is not going to be able to do it, I can tell you. You know what Denmark did recently to boost up security in Greenland? They added one more dome sled. It's true. They thought that was a great move.
What would the justification be for a plane to Greenland? What would the justification
Oh, I don't want to talk about Greenland now. I just say this. We need Greenland from the standpoint of national security. And the European Union needs us to have it, and they know that.
I think there's some confusion from Americans and maybe the community in the world when it comes to what you said about Rodriguez earlier today in a phone interview. You said that she would face the same fate, if not worse, than Maduro. But it sounds like you're talking to her on the phone and wanting to work
Not
with
me,
her.
my people.
And you are considering her power. Can you just clarify where you stand on Delcy Rodriguez right now being in
I don't have to tell you. I just say that she will face a situation probably worse than Maduro. Because, you know, Maduro gave up immediately.
So she could also
He raised his hand, he gave up. And he did the right thing, but he gave up. So we were so effective, and it was so fast and violent. It was very violent. But we were so effective, he raised his hands and gave up.
What was the most violent moment
I don't want to tell you.
Did you get a
There were some bad moments, but there was some very violent moments. I don't want to tell you.
So you said that you were really very angry with the Ukrainian President Zelensky if he was the one who conducted that strike on Putin's residence.
I don't believe that strike happened.
Right. So Putin had said in that phone call to you that that strike happened. You came out and said that, and you believed Putin. There was some criticism.
There is something that happened fairly nearby, but had nothing to do with this.
Okay, so we know that those interviews above, or those press conferences, I suppose, above Air Force One are difficult to hear at times. They are on an airplane after all, but in a situation like this, with everything that is happening with our top story today regarding Venezuela and regarding international relations here in the United States, we felt like it was important to play as much of that soundbite as we could. We apologize for the audio quality. Now, you heard one particular quote there, President Trump being asked about other countries, including Greenland. We need Greenland from a standpoint of national security. One of the quotes that I made out from that soundbite right there. And speaking of other countries have been mentioned throughout Trump's various media appearances and quotes over the weekend following the situation in Venezuela, where the leader of Venezuela was apprehended and transported to the United States. Let's start with Colombia. Now, Trump was asked about Colombia, and here is one of the quotes that came to reporters on Sunday. He said, Colombia is very sick too, run by a sick man who likes making cocaine and selling it to the United States, and he's not going to be doing it very long, let me tell you. That is a quote from President Donald Trump. Asked if the United States would launch a military operation against Colombia, Trump responded, "It sounds good to me." So those are quotes from President Trump regarding Colombia following the situation in Venezuela. The Colombian president, President Gustavo Petro, also released quotes. He released a statement on the operation against Venezuela and Trump's comments about him, saying, quote, "I deeply reject Trump speaking without knowing. My name does not appear in the judicial files on drug trafficking over 50 years, neither from before nor from the present." Again, that is the president of Colombia in a statement following Trump's comments about him and the United States' actions in Venezuela. That statement continues. "Stop slandering me, Mr. Trump. That's not how you threaten a Latin American president who emerged from the armed struggle and then from the people's struggle for peace in Colombia." So again, that is the president of Colombia speaking after the United States' actions in Venezuela over the weekend and President Donald Trump's subsequent comments about the nation of Colombia. Now, President Trump also has mentioned Cuba in discussing the situation in Venezuela. He said, quote, now they won't have money coming in. They won't have the income coming in. You know, a lot of Cubans were killed yesterday. You know that a lot of Cubans were killed. Again, that is a quote from President Trump. Trump said the Cubans killed on Saturday were trying to protect President Maduro of Venezuela. According to Cuban officials, at least 32 Cuban nationals were killed in the United States operation on Saturday. So I know we're throwing a lot of information right now, and we are jumping around around different nations, if you will, nations that have been spoken about by President Trump. But this is our current situation when it comes to international relations with South America and beyond. More quotes from President Trump regarding Cuba. Quote, Cuba looks like it's ready to fall. I don't know if they're going to hold out, but Cuba now has no income. They got all of their income from Venezuela, from the Venezuelan oil. They're not getting any of it, and Cuba literally is ready to fall, and you have a lot of great Cuban Americans that are going to be very happy about this. Again, quotes from President Donald Trump over the weekend, quotes about Colombia, quotes about Cuba, and quotes about Venezuela, all from President Donald Trump over the weekend, following the United States military operation in Venezuela to capture and remove the Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro, who appeared today in a Manhattan courtroom and pled not guilty to the indictments against him alongside his wife, who did the same thing. Now, we talked about how in Venezuela, Vice President Delcy Rodriguez has been appointed as interim president by the country's Supreme Court. Now, that country's Supreme Court described the U.S. capture of Maduro as, quote, kidnapping. But for now, Vice President Delcy Rodriguez appointed as interim president. So that is the situation. We are going to continue bringing you updates as they come, whether it be about the situation in Venezuela or elsewhere. As we said, a very active weekend in the headlines for the United States when it comes to international relations with South America. Now, let's see. I think that what we probably will do now, because we do not have any live events happening at this moment that require our direct attention, is I think we will play sound from the United Nations earlier today. Member nations speaking about the actions taken by the United States in the country of Venezuela. Naya, it looks like you already have that pulled up, ready to go. So let's do that. Let's go to the pre-recorded comments from inside the United Nations earlier today regarding the situation that happened over the weekend.
Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to speak. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Good morning. I speak in Spanish. Buenos días, señor.
Good morning, ambassadors, representatives of heads of state and government. Thank you to enable me to tell you something about Transparency Venezuela, the work that we have been doing. We have organized I've organized some information I'm going to put forward to you in 5 points.
He organizado la información que voy a
I've arranged the information I'm going to give to you in around 5 points. Let me make the most of my time. First of all, one, the corruption in Venezuela is seen in 73 countries of the world. We have we've seen hundreds of cases that we have documented over the years, more than 500, 600 cases in various countries.
Can you hear us?
Okay, so as we kind of work our way through this video, as you can see, a little stop and go here at the start of this meeting at the United Nations. I think what we may do here is fast forward to comments from member nations. We're going to fast forward through this introduction portion only because it's been a little difficult to understand thus far. We are going to fast forward to comments from member nations at the UN. I believe we found a good starting place, so let's jump back in. We only skipped about 7 minutes of time there, but let's start here and see if that's a little bit easier to understand. It looked like they were still trying to kind of work out some technicalities there.
The floor to those council members who wish to make statements. I give the floor to the representative of Colombia.
Mr. President, Colombia would like to thank Somalia in your quality as President of the Security Council for having quickly responded to our request to convene this emergency meeting, as well as thanking China and Russia for their support for holding of this meeting. And we wish you, Mr. President, a successful month managing the work of the Council at a particularly delicate time for international peace and security. I'd also like to thank Undersecretary General for Political Affairs and Peace Building of the United Nations and the invited briefers. We thank them all for their briefings. This is the first time Colombia is taking the floor in the Security Council as a non-permanent member for the period 2026-2027. Colombia is taking on this responsibility with a deep sense of duty, and we are going to do this from the first day, defending international law and the purposes and principles enshrined in the United Nations Charter. International peace and security, the peaceful settlement of disputes, the prohibition of the use of force, sovereign equality, respect for the territorial integrity and political independence of all states. Colombia condemns categorically the events that occurred in the early morning of the 3rd of January in Venezuela, where we saw multiple explosions and air activity over Caracas and other areas of the country as part of a military attack carried out by the United States, which included bombings of civilian and military infrastructure, creating panic amongst the population. All of this represents clear violations of the sovereignty, political independence, and the territorial integrity of Venezuela. There is no justification whatsoever under any circumstances for the unilateral use of force to commit an act of aggression. Such actions constitute a serious violation of international law and the United Nations Charter, including the prohibition on the use or the threat of the use of force, the principle of the respect for sovereignty and the full authority of states over their territory, including their natural resources, the territorial integrity of states, and the principles of collective defense, particularly when they directly endanger the population and civilian assets. Defending these principles is not an option. Indeed, it's a common obligation that we have in order to preserve international peace and security. We need to remember that the provisions of the Charter allow for the use of force only under exceptional circumstances, in legitimate defense in the face of an armed attack, or when there is an express authorization by this Council in accordance with Chapter 7. And even in those cases, this does not amount to assuming political control of another state. In this regard, we reject any unilateral military action, any act that could worsen the situation or endanger the civilian population, and we would call for a de-escalation de-escalation and non-resort to the use of force, which endangers people finding themselves in this delicate situation. They must be the absolute priority. We have learned from our experience that the civilian population is always the one that pays the highest price in armed conflict. Mr. President, Latin America and the Caribbean have proclaimed themselves to be a zone of peace, and this collective commitment and will of our region must be respected. Unilateral action that is contrary to international law endangers regional stability, increases insecurity, and worsens the already complex conditions being faced by the civilian population, with devastating effects that will transcend the sovereign borders of Venezuela to have a direct impact on countries of the region, such as Colombia. In order to act preventively, Colombia has engaged in measures to protect the civilian population and preserve the stability of the border, addressing the possible needs of the population, particularly the migrant population, in coordination with local authorities. Colombia has been and will continue to be show solidarity in receiving the Venezuelan people who, given the uncertainty created by these attacks, this may lead to a massive outflow of migration, which will require significant efforts in terms of resources and capacities to provide the necessary support and assistance to those areas affected by taking in the migrants. Mr. President, these actions that we have seen remind us of the worst interference in our area in the past, in our zone of peace. And it calls to mind the commitment that we have as states to resolve our differences peacefully through dialogue and negotiation or other forms of peaceful settlement, in full accordance with international law and with its instruments to which we have subscribed at the hemispheric and regional levels, such as the Charter of the Organization of American States. It's also important to understand the dimension of this situation for international peace and security beyond our region, particularly when a permanent member of the Security Council takes the decision to use force and assume control unilaterally of another sovereign state, with the aim, amongst other things, of taking its natural and strategic resources. This is very worrisome for the international community, the international order that was established after the Second World War, and flagrantly violates international law and is in clear contradiction with the United Nations Charter and the very goal for which this council was created. If a country, and particularly a country that is a permanent member of this council, disregards international law that we designed in San Francisco, what then is the role of this council, and where are the foundations for international peace and security? We are accepting that the law and the interests of the strongest prevail over multilateralism and over agreements that we have forged with dialogue and diplomacy in this very chamber. Democracy cannot be promoted or defended through violence or coercion, and it cannot be superseded either by economic interests. Democracy can only be built and sustained through respect for the will of peoples, the reaffirmation of the rule of law, through political dialogue and peaceful and inclusive processes. Venezuela deserves to live in peace, in democracy, prosperity, and dignity, with a government that is defined in sovereignty by no one else than the Venezuelan people and their institutions. This is why Colombia has reiterated its call to open up paths for democracy in Venezuela through specific popular decisions being taken. The importance of preserving peace, respect for international law, and the protection of life and human rights must prevail over anything else. Colombia reaffirms its conviction that working tirelessly under these principles in our new role as a non-permanent member of the Security Council is what we plan to do, and we make ourselves available, good offices available for a diplomatic way out of the current crisis in this brotherly country. We will meet our responsibility, primary responsibility, to maintain international peace and security. And given the seriousness of the events, we will continue to pay attention to this issue. And we'd also like to thank the Secretary General of the United Nations for providing his good offices to defend the purposes and principles of the United Nations Charter, to activate channels for mediation available to him and facilitate dialogue with the parties concerned, looking in the search for alternatives that will make it possible to find a way out of the situation led by Venezuelans themselves and provide assistance to Venezuelans that need this. In conclusion, we'd urge the parties to exercise maximum caution and restraint, to de-escalate tensions, and to follow dialogue and diplomatic channels, and develop mechanisms to avoid continued flagrant violations of international law. This will require the help of the United Nations and of regional organizations. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of Colombia for her statement and now give the floor to the representative of Russian Federation.
Mr. President, first and foremost, we wish to congratulate you on your accession to the presidency of the Security Council. And second, we wish to welcome the newly elected members of the Security Council. The beginning of this new year shocked all of those throughout the world who cherish the hope that respect for international law and non-intervention in domestic affairs of other states, as well as a reliance upon diplomacy and seeking of compromise, became key principles in the work of the new U.S. administration.
Okay, so of course we just heard from the Colombian representatives at the United Nations. That was a representative from the Russian Federation just beginning their comments. We hope to play those comments in full at some point in time. However, we came back here into the Live Impact News studio because we have a major event going on right here in Hampton Roads today. As we mentioned at the top of the show, Pete Hegseth is in Newport News visiting shipbuilding yards and a recruiting station as a part of his Arsenal of Freedom tour. So Secretary Hegseth here in Newport News, of course, in the midst of international relations being in the headlines with everything happening with Venezuela, South America in general. And so Pete Hegseth will be here, and we are live at that event. You see it on your screen. He has not taken the podium yet, but we want to be prepared to take that live as soon as Secretary Hegseth takes the podium. It is, of course, a unique confluence of events that the United States is in the midst of a major situation when it comes to Venezuela, and at that same time, Secretary Pete Hegseth is right here in Newport News preparing to give comments at his Arsenal of Freedom tour. So we want to make sure we get out to that tour as soon as he begins speaking. We have heard from our reporter, Brianna Fallon, who is on site, that he will begin speaking very soon. Now, in the lead up to that, I think perhaps what we'll try to do, if we have just enough time, which we may not, is play comments from Congresswoman Jen Kiggins, 2nd District Congresswoman right here in Hampton Roads, as she spoke about, among other things, Venezuela and Secretary Hegseth. So what we will do is we will go to Congresswoman Kiggins' comments right now. If Secretary Hegseth takes the stage, we will go live out to Newport News. We know that may feel abrupt, so we're warning you ahead of time. If we cut out of Congresswoman Kiggins' comments, it would only be to go live out to Newport News for Secretary Hegseth. And then It's only 1:46. So if we have time later in the show, we can go back to the United Nations and listen to the rest of the comments from the Russian Federation and others as they convene today with a number of different countries speaking about the United States' actions in Venezuela. For now, let's listen in to Congresswoman Kiggins.
All right. So obviously, the headlines this weekend, the whole world is watching. The United States has taken Nicolas Maduro into custody. What was your reaction when you heard about the military operation and the capture?
Yeah, the capture of Maduro, who is now in U.S. custody, is just a perfect example of peace through strength and what that looks like and why this administration is continuing to prioritize that. I want to commend our military, especially our Navy from the East Coast and from our master jet base and our naval station here, who participated in those strikes and those actions there. But very important that it sends a message to the world that the United States is looking out for our security and our best interest, and we have an administration focused on that. And so we continue to be supportive. You know, Maduro is a illegitimately elected communist dictator who is he's the ringleader of narco-terrorism, especially in our country, but throughout the world, and cozies up to adversaries like China and Iran and harboring other terrorist groups. So the fact that he is now in U.S. custody and awaiting a hearing just makes me sleep better at night. I think the world is safer and more at peace with the actions of this administration.
Internationally, other heads of states and other leaders have questioned, while they don't question if Maduro needed to be, removed or dealt with, the way we did it. Do you think that there was any violation of international law in the U.S. military action?
I do not. This was within the president's jurisdiction to take these actions to defend our homeland, which is exactly what he's done. We see 300,000 American young people and Americans who die because of drug overdoses a year. And we have a president now who has recognized that and who is taking actions. It takes time. We've seen a wide open border. We've seen people not only escaping Venezuela and other countries, but bringing drugs into this country. And we are fighting back, and we are finally standing up to that. We're standing up to our adversaries. We're standing up to terrorists. We're standing up to narco-terrorism and people who want to do ill will and harm to our country. So again, it's just an example of peace through strength. I support these actions, and I think it sends a message to the world and to other adversaries who are looking to do harm to our country. We are putting our money where our mouth is and our actions where our mouth is. These are not just words that we're speaking, that we're looking out for defending our homeland and from people who want to do Americans harm. And that's what this administration does every day.
And domestically, some members of Congress have questioned whether or not this military action should have been authorized through Congress before it happened. Do you feel like the president was within his scope to take this action without getting Congress involved?
The president was well within his jurisdiction to take action to defend our homeland. Congress leaks like a sieve. There's nothing that can be kept a secret with 435 members, especially of the United States House. We will get a brief when we go back. I am planning to be in Washington tomorrow. We will be getting a brief from not just the president, but from all leaders who were involved in this strike, and I look forward to learning more.
All right. You also mentioned those East Coast ships, those locally based ships that helped transport Maduro and were part of this operation. And today we have Secretary Hegseth in Newport News talking about the defense acquisition process. What do you think that says about the importance of this region when it comes to our national defense?
Yeah, Hampton Roads is a cornerstone of national security, and what we do here, from building ships to repairing ships to housing our warfighters who live and work on these ships and in these aircraft, I think that is recognized by this administration, certainly recognized by me as a representative of the 2nd District, what we offer for our national security. That's why I spend every day and so much effort in Washington, from the National Defense Authorization Act to my work on Armed Services Committee, to make sure we're taking care of those warfighters, to make sure we're funding not just the resources they need, the ships, the submarine, the aircraft, but that we're taking care of our military men and women and their families. And the fact that we have that recognition now. We have the Secretary of War here in Hampton Roads today looking at our shipbuilding resources in Newport News. We are very proud of them. We look forward to more engagement with the Secretary of War and the Pentagon to get more of those resources here locally so that we continue to build and to not only grow the number of ships we have, but hopefully to get a next generation strike fighter here at our East Coast Master Jet Base, and to continue to support our military families who call Hampton Roads home.
All right. And as both a sitting congresswoman, but also a previous service member, do you think that right now is the best time or an appropriate time to expand the naval fleet?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Again, the world is watching, and there's nothing more important than world peace. And we do that through deterrence. It's a peace through strength approach. And I am so proud of this administration. It's night and day compared to the Biden administration, where we saw weakness on the world stage, which led to what happened in Israel, what happened in Ukraine, with threats to Taiwan, aggression from China. It is night and day. And right now, what we're saying from this administration, it's investment in shipbuilding, it's investment in resources, technology, procurement, acquisition for our warfighters, investment in quality of life and housing and healthcare and childcare for our military families. It is night and day from the last administration. It makes me, as a Navy spouse, as now a proud Navy mom, I think about this every day. I want to take care of our warfighters, and I want to prevent future conflict. And that's what this administration prioritizes as well.
You mentioned future conflict. There have also been sort of rumblings from the president about considering action in Cuba or Colombia. Do you think that if that were to happen, those actions should go through Congress?
I think that those other communist dictators, especially ones that live in our hemisphere and our own backyard, have been put on notice. It is within the purview of the president to take executive action to defend the homeland. Congress, again, you're talking about a large group of people, 435 members in the House, 100 in the Senate, who leak like a sieve. I care about the protection of my military members who are out doing the mission, and it puts them in harm's way whenever we have leaks in any type of operation like that. So it's not necessary as long as it's under the purview of what the president has and his executive actions that he can take. But I really care about preserving and protecting that safety for our servicemen and women.
All right. Any other comments today?
Just very proud, especially USS Iwo Jima, who we know played a significant role in transporting Maduro and his wife back to New York. I am very proud of all of our Navy men and women, especially the ones here from Hampton Roads who played a significant role in these operations, 150 aircraft that were involved. As a former naval aviator, I just know that the practice and precision that took, and I think it sends a great message to the world that there is no better military than the United States military, and I'm very proud of all of them.
All right, Congresswoman Higgins, thank you as always for taking this time with us today.
I appreciate it. Keep in touch.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, so 2nd District Congresswoman Higgins, representing, again, the 2nd District right here in Hampton Roads, speaking about both Secretary Pete Hegseth, his tour of around the country, including Newport News today, as well as speaking about the United States actions in Venezuela over the weekend. Now, we spoke about that tour. Can we listen in on this live shot, Naya? We have our live shot up at the impending rally from Secretary Hegseth. It has not begun yet. Let's take a listen. Let's see if we can hear. Oh, and it looks like our shot may have just gone out just briefly as it has returned. Again, this is the Arsenal of Freedom tour from Secretary Pete Hegseth, and he is in Newport News today visiting shipbuilding yards and a recruiting station. And let's take a brief listen to see if we can get a sense of the festivities and if there will be speakers at the podium soon. Let's just very briefly listen in, Naya, then we'll come back to the studio. We don't need to spend a ton of time on that because clearly it simply has not begun yet. You see people waiting for the rally to begin. So as soon as it does, we will head out to Newport News. Again, we thought that might start by the end of our comments from Congresswoman Higgins. That interview took place earlier today, not long ago at all, with Congresswoman Higgins. So perhaps what we'll do is head back out to our recorded comments from the United Nations about the actions of the United States in Venezuela over the weekend. We initially heard from a representative of Colombia. A representative of the Russian Federation was set to begin speaking when we came back into the studio. And it looks like Naya has that all queued up for us. So we'll go back to our pre-recorded comments from the United Nations earlier today. And if there is an abrupt switch that needs to be made over to Secretary Hegseth, we will do so. For now, let's listen back in on the United Nations.
The assault against the leader of Venezuela, compounded by the deaths of dozens of Venezuelan and Cuban citizens, in the eyes of many, has become a harbinger of a turn back to the era of lawlessness and U.S. domination by force, chaos, and lawlessness, which continues to afflict dozens of states in various regions of the world. There is no and can be no justification for the crimes cynically perpetrated by the United States in Caracas. We firmly condemn the U.S. act of armed aggression against Venezuela in breach of all international legal norms. In connection with the confirmed reports about the presence of the abducted president of Venezuela, Nicolas Maduro, and his spouse in the United States, today, as we are aware, they are in New York, we call upon, corrects the Speaker, the U.S. leadership to immediately release the legitimately elected president of an independent state and his spouse. Any problems existing or conflict between the United States and Venezuela need to be resolved through dialogue. And this is precisely what is enshrined in the UN Charter, the purposes and the principles of which a number of states in recent years have begun to apply selectively, depending upon the political landscape. Today, we are reaping the consequences of their recklessness and selectivity in matters related to respect for the norms of international law, which were linked to the so-called rules-based world order. Here is your rules-based world order in all of its glory, which is horrifying even the staunchest Atlanticists. Mr. President, we extend our firm solidarity with the people of Venezuela in the face of the external aggression. We firmly support and completely support the policy of the Bolivarian government, which is geared towards protection of their national interests and the sovereignty of the country. Washington's aggressive acts have already been condemned by many states and multilateral associations, including the Non-Aligned Movement, the African Union, as well as a group of friends in defense of the Charter of the United Nations. We hope that the international banditry will immediately be met with objective and comprehensive assessment at the international legal level with United Nations, universal mechanisms, and other multilateral formats being brought to bear. This process must not be impacted by the recognition or non-recognition by any given states or groups of states of the legitimacy of Nicolas Maduro. For this reason, unintelligible murmurings and attempts to avoid principled assessments by those who, in other circumstances, froth at the mouth and demand that others respect the UN Charter, today seem particularly hypocritical and unseemly. We hope you will recognize this, and we hope that you will abandon double standards and that you will not attempt to justify such an egregious act of aggression due to a fear of angering the American global gendarme, which is attempting to once again rear its head. We are particularly appalled by the unparalleled cynicism with which Washington did not even attempt to conceal the true aims of its criminal operation, namely the establishment of unbridled control over Venezuela's natural resources and the assertion of their hegemonical ambitions in Latin America. In this way, Washington is generating fresh momentum for neocolonialism and for imperialism, which were repeatedly, decisively condemned and repudiated by the peoples of this region and by the global South as a whole. Distinguished colleagues, under these circumstances, it is exceedingly important for the entire international community to unite and to definitively reject the methods and tools of U.S. military foreign policy, which have been demonstrated in the case of Venezuela. This is the only way it is possible to compel Washington to revisit and to abandon their dangerous misconceptions. As we stated during previous meetings on Venezuela, the bell now tolls across the region, ringing for every country of the Western Hemisphere. The bell is ringing for all UN member states and for the future of the organization itself. Failing to hear this call today is tantamount to projecting cowardice and a lack of principle, essentially blessing ongoing encroachments of international law and rejecting civilized international conduct as a whole. We cannot allow the United States to proclaim itself as some kind of a supreme judge, which alone bears the right to invade any country, to label culprits, to hand down and to enforce punishments, irrespective of notions of international law, sovereignty, and non-intervention. Is this the world we sought to attain as we marked the 80th anniversary of the adoption of the Charter of the United Nations, when we all signed on to the relevant Security Council presidential statement? Is this the aim of United Nations reform, which we all advocate? Or has the United Nations and Security Council thereof, do they no longer exist? And is there need now to seek from Washington a patent rule, so to speak? And is the self-determination of every person's and their right to determine their future worthless? These are the questions that we all must address today. And if this response is sincere, if it is principled, then perhaps the U.S. leadership, too, which openly is asserting intention to run another country for the benefit of the United States, they will perhaps glance at their own constitution, their constitution of the United States, which begins with the words, "We the people of the United States," and will begin, in fact, to recognize the sovereignty of other states rather than deposing inconvenient regimes. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Russian Federation and now give the floor to the representative of China.
President, China supports the Security Council holding an emergency meeting regarding the United States military strikes on Venezuela. And thanks USG DiCarlo for reading out the briefing of the Secretary General Guterres. I have listened carefully to the statements of the briefers, and we welcome to this meeting the permanent representative of Venezuela and representatives of other countries. On January the 3rd, the United States blatantly launched large-scale military strikes against Venezuela, forcibly seized Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro and his wife, and took them out of the country. It claimed that it will run Venezuela and even didn't rule out launching a second round of military operations on an even larger scale. China is deeply shocked by and strongly condemns the unilateral, illegal, and bullying acts of the U.S. For some time now, the international community has repeatedly expressed grave concern over the U.S. sanctions, blockade, and threats of force against Venezuela. The Council convened 2 emergency meetings, during which Secretary General Guterres, many Council members, and countries in the region and beyond unanimously called for abiding by the UN Charter and international law, maintaining calm and restraint, resolving disputes peacefully, de-escalating tensions, and safeguarding regional stability. However, as a permanent member of the Council, the U.S. has disregarded the grave concerns of the international community, wantonly trampled upon Venezuela's sovereignty, security, and legitimate rights and interests, and seriously violated the principles of sovereign equality, non-interference in internal affairs, peaceful settlement of international disputes, and the prohibition of the use of force in international relations. These principles constitute the fundamental tenets of the UN Charter and form the cornerstone of maintaining international peace and security. The U.S. has placed its own power above multilateralism and military action above diplomatic efforts, posing a grave threat to peace and security in Latin America and the Caribbean, and indeed internationally. China firmly opposes this, and the international community has also expressed widespread grave concern and strong condemnation. we urge the U.S. to heed the overwhelming voice of the international community, abide by international law and the purposes and principles of the UN Charter, cease infringing upon the sovereignty and security of other countries, stop toppling the government of Venezuela, and return to the path of political solutions through dialogue and negotiations. We call on the U.S. to ensure the personal safety of President Maduro and his wife and to release them at once. We support the Council in fulfilling its primary responsibility to maintain international peace and security, and we support all efforts by the UN Secretary General, regional countries, and organizations that contribute to promoting dialogue and de-escalating the situation. President, the lessons of history are a stark warning. Military means are not the solution to problems, and the indiscriminate use of force will only lead to greater crisis. The U.S. bypassed the Council to launch military operations against Iraq, blatantly attacked Iran's nuclear facilities, and imposed economic sanctions, military strikes, and even armed occupations on multiple countries in Latin America and the Caribbean. These actions have caused persistent conflict, instability, and immense suffering for the ordinary people. Did these actions bring peace and stability? Did they bring development and prosperity? The international community sees this clearly. Venezuela is an independent sovereign state with every right to defend its sovereignty and national dignity. Countries in Latin America and the Caribbean are important forces in maintaining world peace and stability and promoting global development and prosperity, and they have every right to independently choose their development paths and partners. No country can act as the world's police, nor can any state presume to be the international judge. China firmly supports the government and people of Venezuela in safeguarding their sovereignty, security, and legitimate rights and interests. We firmly support the regional countries in upholding the status of Latin America and the Caribbean as a zone of peace. We demand that the United States change its course, cease its bullying and coercive practices, and develop relations and cooperation with regional countries on the basis of mutual respect, equality, and non-interference in international affairs. China stands ready to work with the regional countries and the international community to strengthen solidarity and cooperation, uphold fairness and justice, and jointly safeguard peace and stability in Latin America and the Caribbean. I thank you, President.
I thank the representative of China for the statement and now give the floor to the representative of Liberia.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have the honor to deliver this statement on behalf of the A3 members, namely the Democratic Republic of Congo, Somalia, and my own country, Liberia. We thank the Presidency for promptly convening this important meeting. We congratulate Somalia on assuming the presidency of the Security Council this month and warmly welcome all new members. The A3 appreciates USG DiCarlo's comprehensive briefing and listened carefully to the remarks offered by civil society representatives. We also welcome the representative of Venezuela and the representatives of the region to this meeting. Mr. President, the A3 aligns itself with the recent communique of the African Union on the situation in the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela and continues to monitor developments there with deep concerns. In particular, we note reports regarding the detention of President Nicolas Maduro and his wife and incidents involving Venezuelan institutions. Such developments present serious challenges not only to Venezuela's internal stability, but also underscore the imperative to safeguard the broader peace and security of the region. The A3 remains steadfast in its commitment to the fundamental principles of international law, including the full respect for the sovereignty and territorial integrity of states as enshrined in the Charter of the United Nations, in the interest of regional stability and international peace. We believe these are essential foundations for international cooperation.
Okay, so you heard from a number of different nations there speaking about the United States actions in Venezuela. If you're just joining us, over the weekend, a military operation captured and removed Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro and his wife from Venezuela and brought them to the United States. This afternoon, they stood and pled not guilty to the charges, to the indictments against them in a Manhattan courtroom. So, again, earlier today, not long before we came on stream, different representatives of various nations in the UN speaking about this situation, the actions the U.S. took in Venezuela. Now, we remain in waiting for Secretary Hegseth to take the podium in Newport News. It does look like there is some activity on the stage. As you can see, that's our shot on the bottom. That's the ABC network shot on the top. Again, we do have a reporter on the ground there in Newport News. And it does look like someone is approaching the podium to begin speaking. Should we listen in live to Newport News? Naya, it does look like that's about to begin. We also have comments from Senator Mark Warner from just before we came on stream today that we could play as well, because it does not look like it still remains in the setup phase as far as we can tell out in Newport News at Secretary Pete Hegseth's event. His rally, if you will. Okay, let's listen to Senator Warner. Let's listen to Senator Mark Warner from earlier today, and we'll continue to keep an eye on Newport News. We'll head out there live as soon as that event starts in full. For now, let's listen to Senator Warner.
Okay. Well, good afternoon, everyone, and I hope everybody had a safe New Year's and good holidays over the last few weeks. Appreciate you joining me because, boy, this is literally the new year starting off with a bang, and I want to share with you some of my reflections and questions I've got about the president's efforts to extract Nicolas Maduro from Venezuela and his claim of now trying to run the country. Let me start by, first of all, commending our military. They performed remarkably to extract Maduro from his home without any loss of life. To execute this was brilliantly done. And let me also say at the front end, Maduro was a repressive leader, a bad guy. And candidly, we should have done much more, taken much greater action back in 2024 under President Biden when the Venezuelan people spoke overwhelmingly and voted against Maduro. And he could have used that moment to really bring pressure to bear. But we are now where this action, which was taken without any congressional consultation, Secretary Rubio did try to contact me after the raid had started. We missed, but he did try to contact me. Really goes against the basic tenets of our system. You know, the ability to declare war, the ability to take this broad a military action, and I completely reject that this was somehow simply an execution of a warrant. It just doesn't pass the smell test when you sent in the Delta teams and you literally have our armada off the coast of Venezuela for months. I mean, let's look at the reasoning that the administration used. If any country can go in and extract a leader of another nation simply based upon the presumption that they broke our law, what would then stop Vladimir Putin from saying, well...
Okay, now we are remiss to cut off Senator Mark Warner in the midst of his opening remarks, but as you can see on your screen, Secretary Hegseth is taking to the stage in Newport News right here in Hampton Roads, so we are going to go live out to that rally, again, right here in the 757. We apologize for the audio there. I am so sorry if that caught anyone off guard. That was quite loud. Let's try this again. We're going to try to get a handle on the audio before going back live out to Newport News.
Thank you. Well, good afternoon. How we doing? Oh, man. It is great to see this beautiful group and to be here in Newport News. And I want to thank all of you for what you do. That's why we're here. That's why we're launching the Arsenal of Freedom Tour. It's about all of you. Some of you are wearing a uniform. Some of you are not. All of you are wearing hard hats, and all of you are contributing to the warfighter. The kind of urgency that we need is you understand the speed and the specificity of the beautiful machines that you create require an expertise and an investment that this administration is prepared to make and make fast. It's always inspiring to stand amongst patriots who quite literally are building our nation's firepower. I had a chance this morning to swear in some new recruits. We have a historic recruiting surge at the Department of War. Record amounts of Americans want to join our uniform class. Last year was a record of multiple decades. This year, we're already ahead of last year. Americans are fired up to serve. I also had a chance to go to our next aircraft carrier, the JFK. I don't know if you heard, but our aircraft carriers have been busy recently. That one will be busy for decades to come, ensuring America is free and safe and powerful. And now here we are at Newport News Shipyard at the USS Oklahoma. And I'm here on behalf of the President, who has, from his first day in office, operated on a few core principles at the baseline: pure, unadulterated common sense. First, that a leader's primary duty is to put America and Americans first. Second, that the surest and only real path to peace is through strength. We're in the strength business. You are in the strength business. And third, that a nation that cannot build things, a nation that can't create its own tools or its own defenses or its own future, is a nation that is in managed decline. President Donald J. Trump looked at that managed decline, a decline that had been accepted by elites in both parties, and he rejected it. And we fundamentally reject it. And in doing so, he has unleashed a great American revival, a reawakening of our industrial spirit and our national confidence, a new golden age for America that you are all a part of building. As his Secretary of War, my mission is to execute President Trump's vision within our armed forces and ignite that revival. The mission has three core components, three pillars upon which we are building our national security. It's actually quite simple. First, we're reviving the warrior ethos inside our fighting force, reminding our warriors and our uniformed military that their sole purpose is to be the most lethal fighting force on the planet. So no more DEI, no more dudes in dresses, no more distractions. We're done with that shit. It's just standards, accountability, readiness, training, discipline, and lethality. Back to basics across the department, which is what our warriors really want. Second, we must and we are rebuilding our military with the best equipment, training, and leadership to ensure our warfighters are never in a fair fight. And you've seen historic investments, over $1 trillion in the last budget. You'll see even more, and it isn't just in platforms, it is in people. And third, we're reestablishing deterrence that's so absolute and so unquestioned that our enemies will not dare to test us. You see, under the previous administration, whether it was the debacle of the withdrawal in Afghanistan that cost American lives and smeared our reputation, whether it was the war unleashed in Israel after October 7th by Hamas, or the war in Ukraine, that never would have started under President Trump. The world started wondering whether America really was strong and whether America really could lead. Well, that's over now. Just ask the Houthis and our ships that now sail freely. Imagine that. Under the previous administration, when our ships got shot at, we just said, I guess we have to deal with it. All the way back to Thomas Jefferson, we said, you're not shooting at our ships, and if you do, you may not see tomorrow. Well, we did that with the Houthis, and our ships now sail freely all around the world without being attacked and without being shot at. That's peace through strength. Same with Midnight Hammer, where our B-2s flew 37 hours down and back and were never seen by the Iranians and dropped 14 precision munitions exactly where they were supposed to drop, obliterating Iran's nuclear capabilities, not to mention the Tomahawks that came off of a beautiful submarine and delivered that decisive blow as well on one of the nuclear facilities. Deterrence is back. Not to mention drug boats in the Caribbean and the Eastern Pacific carrying drugs headed to the United States to poison the American people. We're not playing the whole catch and release game anymore. These are foreign terrorist organizations, the Al-Qaeda of our hemisphere, and we will sink every drug boat headed in our direction. Reestablishing deterrence. Our southern border, which allowed an invasion of people we didn't know who they were under the previous administration, 7 months of zero crossings at our border. A country that isn't sovereign is not a country. Reestablishing deterrence. And then we saw 3 nights ago in downtown Caracas in Venezuela, as nearly 200 of our greatest Americans went downtown in Caracas. It seems those Russian air defenses didn't quite work so well, did they? Downtown Caracas, and grabbed an indicted individual wanted by American justice in support of law enforcement without a single American killed. Reestablishing deterrence. Because of President Trump's leadership, the world is taking notice. They're noticing American power, they're noticing American strength, they're noticing American clarity and leadership, and you are at the core of ensuring that happens. Everything we're doing is aimed at those goals. And that's why just before Christmas at Mar-a-Lago, I had the privilege of joining President Trump and the Secretary of the Navy for a historic announcement, the creation of the Golden Fleet. The Golden Fleet is the Navy's investment to revitalize America's maritime industrial base and rapidly build and sustain the fleet and fundamentally change how we do business and maintain military supremacy. This new battle fleet, anchored by a new generation of Trump-class battleships, is a declaration to the world that our command of the seas is and will remain non-negotiable. That announcement, along with the incredible vital work being done right here, is a generational commitment to American sea power. This investment in both the visible might of battleships and the stealthy lethality of the submarines built in this very yard is a direct investment in peace through strength. It's an investment in the future fight, ensuring that America has the tools to win any conflict, anywhere, anytime. And as was mentioned, today marks the first stop on a month-long Arsenal of Freedom tour from the War Department. And on this tour, we'll be traveling from the shipyards of the coast to the factories of the heartland to see the work being done by the military and our partners in American manufacturing to usher in a new golden age of peace through strength, a revival of our industrial base, all American-made by the best Americans. We know that our treasured freedoms are only as secure as our arsenal is strong, and nothing is more important than securing that freedom. So I'm here to thank you, the men and women assembled here today, and those you represent, who are designing and constructing our weapons of war that my children and yours, my grandchildren and yours, will rely upon to ensure the peace, stability, and security of the United States. You are standing shoulder to shoulder with the warfighters of the War Department. Allow me for a moment to speak plainly about the threats to that freedom. We find ourselves in a world of growing threats, a world the comfortable elites in Washington refuse to acknowledge for far too long. For decades, a bipartisan consensus sold this country a dangerous fantasy. They told us that history was over, that the rise of peer competitors was a relic of the past, and that we could afford to trade out our industrial might, our factories, our jobs, our self-sufficiency for the hollow promises of globalism. Like Esau in the book of Genesis, they sold our birthright for a bowl of soup. They were content with a managed decline, overseeing the slow, steady erosion of our naval power and our defense industrial base as if it were some inevitable tide of history. Outsourcing our jobs, outsourcing our manufacturing was just the way it is in a global economy. Foolishness, recklessness. Not anymore. Not under President Trump. While we were policing the world, nation building in deserts, and debating pronouns at the Pentagon, our primary competitors, like the Chinese Communist Party, did something very different. They studied us, they learned from our triumphs and our mistakes, and then they started to build as well. And they've undertaken some of the most rapid, ambitious, and breathtaking naval buildup since World War II. While we decommissioned ships, they launched many of them. While some of our shipyards did not meet the demands of our country, they expanded at a rapid pace, but not anymore. While we seek good relations with China and the rest of the world, we are also ready. President Donald Trump understands that the American people are ready and they deserve a new golden age. We recognize that we are in a new era of great power competition, a generational struggle to maintain peace through strength, and we will rise to meet that challenge. That is why we proudly call ourselves the Department of War, not the Department of Defense, not because we seek war, but because we truly understand that in order to ensure peace, you need to be prepared to deter war and, if necessary, decisively win it. Our purpose is not to be reactive, but to be dominant, so that no enemy, any enemy, will ever attempt to challenge the United States of America. Now, this revival is not a matter of speeches or policy papers or think tanks and white papers in Washington, D.C. This is a matter of action. Across the entire War Department, we are developing new operational concepts. We're deploying cutting-edge technologies at a speed that's not been seen in generations. And we're making historic, multi-generational investments in the capabilities that we will need to dominate the future fight at a level of urgency that must match the urgency of the moment. Most importantly, we're getting these capabilities in the hands of our warfighters faster than we ever have since World War II. Under President Trump, we are systemically dismantling the bloated, risk-averse, and self-serving bureaucracy that has stifled innovation for decades. We're streamlining our requirements and acquisition process, cutting through red tape. This is not the same old reform that is always talked about in Washington, but instead it's an overhaul, it's revolutionary, it is a renaissance of American manufacturing. I've made it crystal clear to the entire defense industry, which I didn't come from and I didn't work for, so I don't give a damn who wins. I just want the best. We've been clear, the era of rewarding delays and cost overruns is over. The days of cost-plus contracts for programs that are years behind schedule are finished. We will no longer give longer, larger, more predictable contracts to companies that deliver on time and on budget. Companies that invest in their people, that invest in more capability and more capacity, not companies that invest in stock buybacks or CEO salaries or more dividends. For those who can't adapt, who are too comfortable with the old, slow ways of doing business, we wish them well in their other future endeavors. Because we will find new partners who will adapt, who will invest, who will take care of their people, who will move at speed and at scale. We will reward that speed, that scale, that innovation, and that performance. We're not rewarding process, paperwork, or just the C-suite. This submarine behind me, and the many more that will follow it, is an embodiment of our commitment to and investment in the security of the American people. But it also represents something more profound. It represents national confidence. Confidence in American shipbuilding, confidence in our industrial discipline, and confidence in the United States Navy's ability to deliver the combat power needed in the future fight. The work you do here every single day is the leading edge of that national restoration. You are proving to the world, and more importantly to ourselves, that it can be done, that history is not over, that we build and that we invest. The media should take a long look at this vessel, the USS Oklahoma. This Virginia-class submarine is a paragon of American engineering and fighting spirit. It is the apex predator of the undersea domain and the most advanced and lethal submarine ever built. As our president says, and he's right, we're 20 years ahead of anybody else in this domain. It is a strategic advantage that creates dilemmas on a daily basis for our adversaries all around the globe. It's a silent hunter that can operate with stealth in the most contested, dangerous waters on the planet. It can gather intelligence that no satellite can ever hope to see. That's what reestablishing deterrence looks like. And it's how we keep the peace in a dangerous world. Let there be no mistake, under President Trump, the United States is serious about the command of our seas and about keeping the world's vital shipping lanes open. A larger, more modern, and more lethal fleet, from the new battleships of the Golden Fleet to the advanced submarines you build right here, will provide that undeniable deterrent. It will ensure that America's Navy moves freely and uncontested today, tomorrow, and long into the future. But all of the strategies from the Pentagon, all the funding from Congress, and all the designs from our brightest engineers are ultimately meaningless without the people on this floor. The welders, the electricians, the pipe fitters, the steam fitters, the engineers, the planners, the skilled tradesmen of Huntington Ingalls. You are the engine of the arsenal of freedom. Patriots, all of you. Our warfighters cannot win without you. We are in this fight together, shoulder to shoulder. That's why we launched the Arsenal of Freedom tours, to ensure the workers across America understand how committed we are to you and how reliant we are on your ability to deliver. It's a beautiful codependence, actually. There is an unbreakable line tying the wrench in your hand to the safety and survival of a 22-year-old American sailor patrolling the depths of the Pacific. The quality of your work, your unwavering commitment to excellence, your speed, your patriotism itself, you give our warriors the decisive edge. Yours is a high calling. You are building a shield for our nation, bolt by bolt and weld after weld. In a culture that too often celebrates the shallow, the virtual, and the superficial, you are engaged in something real, something tangible, something lasting. Your workmanship is and should be celebrated. There is an inherent dignity involved in crafting useful, powerful, and lethal things. I mean, there's a reason Jesus was a carpenter, not a politician, right? There's something about building in America. We build better, stronger, more capable, and we will build more and faster because we've done it before, and we're going to do it again. And that's why this administration and this department is fighting for you, your way of life, and the renaissance of manufacturing in this country. We're holding your leadership accountable. We're holding your leadership feet to the fire. Their jobs are on the line to ensure that you can deliver what America needs, that your craftsmanship is unleashed, that you are taken care of, that you are paid properly, that your work is done safely, that we can move at speed and at scale. Because when our workers succeed, our country succeeds. And a nation that builds is a nation that wins, and our president is a builder. And that's why we will win. So to all of you here today, from the newest apprentice to the most experienced master shipbuilder, and to our sailors who work with them, again, back to where I started, thank you. I want you to know that whether you're wearing a uniform, coveralls, or a suit, the work you're doing is important, it's patriotic, and essential to our nation. It is a noble calling in a world that has forgotten what nobility looks like. You know, I used some words when I spoke after the raid a couple of days ago that feel outdated to some, but they fit perfect for our warfighters. Guts, grit, gallantry, and glory. May we revive those words. May we live them out, no matter how small the task or how big the task, simple or mundane the task or complex the task. Every aspect of what had to come together to make that mission successful was an ingredient to the kind of guts, grit, gallantry, and glory that our warriors embody, and you contribute to that. Be proud of what you do here. Be proud of the incredible vessels that you bring to life. They are the guarantees of freedom, the guardians of our peace, a message to the entire world that you should never, ever bet against America. And know that we have your back as you move faster, on time, and on budget, investing in your plants and in your people. We have a lot left to accomplish on behalf of the warfighters, and we look forward to continuing to do it. It's the honor of a lifetime. I serve to serve. My job is to make your job easier. That's why our ear is to the ground everywhere we go. What can we do to make you more useful in how you operate? Because together we will rebuild our military, we will restore our industrial might, and secure peace for generations to come. We will build the arsenal of freedom. God bless you, God bless our Navy, and God bless our great republic. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you. Keep going.
Okay, so there you have it. Secretary Pete Hegseth in Newport News in Hampton Roads, and it looks like our photographer is on his way to wrap up their coverage of this event, but we were able to run that speech in its entirety live from Newport News as Secretary Pete Hegseth continues his tour around the country, the Arsenal of Freedom Tour, a series of rallies, today's of which was held right here in the 757. Okay, let's reset here. We're back in the Live Impact News studio. Throughout the duration of today, we did have a forecast from Taylor Stephenson, but other than that, we have been almost entirely focused on the story regarding the United States actions in Venezuela. Now, we've been over it a couple times already, so I will give a very brief foundation of this story. We were just about to hear from Senator Mark Warner before we went live out to Newport News. He was able to get about a minute of his opening remarks at his weekly press conference in before we had to cut away, so we're going to go back to his statement after laying this foundation that the United States conducted a military operation in Venezuela on Saturday where they extracted Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro and his wife from their home country and brought them to the United States. Today, President Nicolas Maduro and his wife were in a Manhattan courtroom where they pleaded not guilty to the indictments brought against them, including weapons and drugs charges. And so now they are here in the United States. The acting president in Venezuela has taken over, but President Trump has also made comments in which he implies that the United States will be running Venezuela for now. So it's a situation where it is developing as we speak. As we said, already major developments today, including the United Nations gathering with various member countries giving statements on the United States' actions in Venezuela. Now, I want to make sure that I get my language right when I talk about this entire situation. It's Vice President Delcy Rodriguez that was appointed as the interim president of Venezuela. I mentioned that interim president was acting, and it is Delcy Rodriguez that will be doing so. And I want to make sure that any other foundational pieces of information that we need before going to Senator Mark Warner are included here. President Donald Trump on Saturday saying the U.S. would take control of Venezuela's massive oil reserves and recruit American companies to invest billions of dollars to refurbish the country's gutted oil industry. So that, another factor here. One of the largest crude oil reserves in the world exists in Venezuela. By billions of barrels, it is the largest at 303 billions of barrels of crude oil in Venezuela, which is obviously a part of this situation as well. So now I think it is time that we can listen to Senator Mark Warner as he made comments during his weekly media availability earlier today. And he opens his comments by speaking about Venezuela and then ultimately takes questions from the assembled press. So let's go out to Mark Warner right now.
Zelensky broke Russian law, so he can go take him out, or stop President Xi from taking over Taiwan, because Chinese law has said for the last 40 years that Taiwan is simply a breakaway province. If we set up that set of rules and that set of precedents, there is no such thing in any international order, and big countries can go and extract leaders on any kind of charges that they might be brought up against. And if we say, well, American law is better than anyone else, well, if that's the case, why would this president then pardon the former Honduran president Hernandez, who was indicted and convicted under American law, was serving time for the exact same type of charges that were brought against Maduro, and yet Trump pardons him? So this puts us, I think, on a very dangerous path, the underlying reasons and rationale for this extraction. It was bold, but the question is kind of what next? And now we have the question of, the president has claimed that he's going to run Venezuela. Well, it appears that this extraction had very little to do with drugs and drug running, and much more to do with oil. And the idea that the American people could potentially have their sons and daughters who serve in the armed forces be troops on the ground in Venezuela to secure their oil. We've seen this movie before. We saw that when the Bush administration promised that the invasion of Iraq would be costless, that Iraqi oil would pay for it. That wasn't how it played out. And if you go back in history, even to 1953, when the CIA instituted a coup against the then Iranian leadership, again to protect oil, and instead creating ultimately one of our greatest adversaries, Iran, because of those actions, because there was not a plan of what next. And I have no idea about what is next. I do know that the Venezuelan people deserve democracy. They have expressed their views against Maduro. But again, the president, rather than saying he wants to work with the Venezuelan opposition, led by Ms. Machado, who received the Nobel Peace Prize for her work as opposition leader in Venezuela, instead, and maybe he's mad because he didn't get the Nobel Prize, and just blows off Machado and says she's not strong enough. Is that really his choice to make, or is it not the Venezuelan people's choice to make? I've sat on a number of briefs around Venezuela. I've never heard the current acting president, Rodriguez, viewed as anything other than a loyalist to Maduro and to Chavez before Maduro. So an awful lot of questions about what motivated this extraction. What was the legal reasoning? Couldn't it be used by other nation states against our allies around the world? And again, it's the Western Hemisphere is something I've been interested in. I was an exchange student in high school in Argentina. We have often treated Central America and South America with almost benign neglect. But in many ways, over the last 70 years, there has been one theme from Democratic and Republican administrations that we were trying to change our image as a colonial or imperial power and looking to try to work with countries in that region in a collaborative way. Well, it looks like that 70 plus years of bipartisan foreign policy has been thrown out the window with a new, I guess he's calling it the Donroe Doctrine. What does that mean in terms of how Central America and South America will view us? Will it unite them against us? Or this whole kind of 1950s notion of spheres of influence? Well, if we had the sphere of influence in the Western Hemisphere, does that mean China's okay to take any country it wants in East Asia? Does that mean that Russia can take and reconstitute the old Soviet Union against nations that are now democracies? Where do we head from here? This afternoon, I hope to start getting some of those answers when the Gang of Eight will be meeting with the Defense Secretary, the Secretary of State, and I believe the Attorney General and others. I've got a lot of questions need to get answered, particularly since so many Virginians are already in harm's way, since most of the armada that has been assembled off the coast of Venezuela actually is home ported in Norfolk. And I've got a lot of questions before we put those sailors and soldiers in harm's way, particularly if at the end of the day this is about trying to take Venezuelan oil and not about restoring democracy, or for that matter even breaking up some of the drug activity that's coming out of Venezuela. So lots of questions, and I'm sure you guys have got questions as well, so why don't I turn it over to Catherine and I'll start taking your questions.
All right, folks, and just before we get into the questions, this is a reminder for everyone to please mute their microphones if they're not actively asking a question. The first person in our question queue is Tom with Fox 5.
Tom, are you there?
Great. The next question is from Mitchell with WTOP.
Hi, Senator. Thanks for joining us. You have worked over the years with former Senator Marco Rubio, now the Secretary of State. What would you like to hear from him in terms of firming up plans for Venezuela? And related to the costs, the administration has said there are essentially no costs because of the oil, but as you just noted, there's an armada of some 15,000 military personnel, including many from Virginia, that are based in the Caribbean right now.
Yep. We have already incurred costs in the tens, if not hundreds of millions, by deploying this fleet, by deploying this armada. The idea that the president has said he doesn't mind putting boots on the ground. I want to hear from Secretary Rubio an acknowledgement that this is not simply some execution of a warrant. I mean, you don't land Delta Force if you're doing law enforcement. You don't launch 150 planes. You don't put a 15,000 person armada off the coast of a country for months on end and potentially for months going forward. I want to know what the plan on the next steps will be. Our military, as we saw the other night, they executed brilliantly, but they've got to be led by a commander-in-chief that's got a real plan. And I don't see that real plan. I think it is obvious, at least from the president's own words, that this is about oil. It's not so much about stopping drugs, or sure as heck not about trying to bring some stability to and democracy back to Venezuela, which for a long time was one of our closest allies in South America. So I've got a lot of questions for Secretary Rubio. I've worked well with him. I appreciate the fact that he tried to contact me, but it was not, as the rules are, you're supposed to contact and consult Congress before a strike, not after the strike. So I've got a lot of questions about where we go from here, and do they really, the notion that this was a law enforcement action doesn't pass the smell test at all. And are they really going to stick to the idea that it is okay for any big country to go in and snatch a leader of a smaller country if they simply make the claim that they've violated the large country's laws? And that seems to be the precedent that was set, and I hope you can disabuse me of that notion.
All right, the next question is from Nathaniel with Scripps News.
Hey, Senator, thank you for doing this. Really appreciate it. I want to touch back to a point that you just brought up regarding congressional notification. Secretary Rubio told reporters the morning after this attack and extraction that this was not the kind of mission that you could give congressional notification on. Given your years of working with him on the Intelligence Committee, do you take that as a credible response from him? Do you take him at his word on that?
The Gang of Eight was set up for exactly this circumstance. You take the leadership, Democrat and Republican of the House and Senate, and the leadership of the intelligence committees. We absolutely know how critical it is to keep confidential information confidential. It's never leaked. So I disagree with my friend Marco Rubio. This is exactly the kind of circumstance where you would notify the Gang of Eight at the most confidential level before an attack took place. And the idea that they're trying to argue that this is simply some kind of law enforcement action, it doesn't pass the smell test.
All right, our next question is from Gabrielle with Nexstar.
Hi, Senator. Thanks for taking the time. With Congress returning this week, Venezuela is almost overshadowing a number of other big issues that you were set to work on this week. Can you speak a little bit about balancing those different issues, like the health care fight with people's premiums already starting to go up? What can be done for that? And does that kind of fall by the wayside this week because of Venezuela?
Well, Gabrielle, in a normal circumstance, that's why we have the committee structure, that you should be able to walk and chew gum at the same time. You should be able to do more than one thing. We clearly will vote on my friend Senator Tim Kaine's resolution, War Powers Act about Venezuela. I will be voting for that resolution, and I'll be anxious to see so many of my Republican friends who'd been quietly issuing concerns about the buildup, about the strikes on the so-called drug boats. Will they find the courage to actually vote their convictions and what they've said privately? Time will tell. And then, yes, the fact that we've got close to 24 million Americans that have seen their healthcare costs skyrocket. And remember, healthcare costs going up, it's not just the folks who lose the tax credits under the ACA, but if you suddenly put 10, 15, 20 million more people into the uninsured basket, they will show up at the emergency room for the highest cost care, oftentimes where they can't pay the bill. That uncompensated care gets passed into the whole system, raising everybody's rates. So it'll be interesting. My Republican friends had plenty of chances to kind of extend the existing program. They chose not to. I think we've got to focus on that, and we've got to focus. I would think, the president and all of us ought to take a lesson from the elections, whether they be in New York, New Jersey, or anywhere around the country, but particularly here in Virginia. What people want is affordability. They don't want their health care costs going up. But if we think about affordability in Virginia, one of the crazy things the administration recently did by basically canceling all the wind projects, offshore wind, that project was running basically $10 to $11 billion. We've spent, the Dominion, using ratepayer money, have spent about $7 billion. It was going to power 400,000 homes. I've been supportive of this project, and again, I appreciate the fact that it's had broad bipartisan support. Was going to make Virginia a leader in wind power across the country. Well, by canceling that, if we can't get it reopened, you're going to have a bunch of sunk costs, and you're going to have utility rates go up. So we've got questions around international circumstance. We've got health care. We've got the affordability issues around utility rates. We've been working for some time. I've got a broad set of bipartisan bills around housing. We need more housing supply. And then, something that's not made a lot of attention, but I'm smack dab in the middle of, which is crypto legislation around market structure. So, this is going to test whether Congress can actually do its job, and that job will be made a heck of a lot easier if it can be done in a bipartisan fashion.
Our next question is from Camila with WTKR.
All right, so that is a portion of Mark Warner's media availability from earlier today. And a point was made in the course of that last question, which is that the situation with Venezuela is overshadowing a number of different things that are happening with Congress now as Congress returns to Washington, D.C. And our show today certainly speaks to that, as we have spent the large portion of this show covering the United States actions in Venezuela and the reactions to those actions. But it is the headline of the day. It is a story that will continue well past today. And so that is the nature of Live Impact News. We will say one other piece of news that did come out today is that Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, a Democrat and former vice presidential candidate, announced today that he would drop his bid for re-election as governor. He said he would not be able to give a campaign all of his attention as he works to defend Minnesota against allegations of fraud. And now, there is currently a federal investigation into the potential welfare fraud scandal in Minnesota that is ongoing, a federal probe into a welfare fraud scandal in Minnesota. So Tim Walz electing not to continue his campaign for re-election as governor for a third term. So that is the other piece of news that we will be able to report on today, and we will continue to cover all of this as we go forward into 2026 here on Live Impact News. We started this show in 2025, so it is kind of now year 2 of the show. We haven't been going for a full calendar year yet, but we appreciate you guys spending time with us each and every day that you can. We try to make sure that we bring you valuable and informative content every single time that you join us here on Live Impact News, while also making sure that we have local, national, and global headlines in the mix, and every once in a while re-engage with Hampton Roads as we cover so much news that's happening around the world. So we're going to end our show today. We have about a minute and a half to go, about 2 minutes to go, with some images from around the 757. That's Hampton, where you can see a clear day out there. The Christmas tree still up, still sparkling in Hampton. A few clouds in the sky. I wouldn't call it necessarily overly bright outside, but it's not really gray or gloomy either. And today, of course, is a precursor to what will be a very warm week, as we heard from Taylor Stephenson. This is City Center, or out in Newport News. Now we move over to Norfolk. Naya's laughing because she changed that on me right as I was labeling the area. Look at the birds across the surface of the ocean, I think. Are those birds down there? They look like birds kind of just flying right by the surface of the water. Out here in Norfolk, not far from our station, over by Nauticus now, near the Battleship, Wisconsin. A beautiful day looking out over the water in Norfolk towards Portsmouth. And it is going to be a beautiful week. As Taylor described it, a more of a chill week when it comes to the weather around here. We're going to reach those 60-degree temps. It is going to be warm out. A little bit of precipitation as we get towards later in the week and the weekend. You look out at the ocean front, a beautiful, picture-perfect day from our tower cam out at the Virginia Beach ocean front. The lights still up from the Christmas festivities at the ocean front, as you can see. And I'm getting the wrap sign from Nia Campbell because it is time for us to go our tour around Hampton Roads to end a very, very busy show today. And we hope to see everybody tomorrow right here on Live Impact News.